a federal judge that many thought would just dismiss the indictment against Mayor Adams because the Trump administration said so, said not so fast, and is now looking into whether there's a corrupt deal between the Trump administration and Mayor Adams to try to force Mayor Adams to violate his oath that he took to the Constitution of the U.S., to the Constitution of New York, to serve the people of New York, and not just compromise his ethics further in order to avoid a criminal indictment or have a criminal indictment dismissed against him. And the Judge Ho, has appointed a special counsel to investigate if there has been a corrupt deal by the Department of Justice suggested by an outgoing member of the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York. We talk about it on Legal AF After Dark. Take a listen.
Michael Popok, let's get right into it. Let's talk about what the federal judge Dale Ho did in New York with respect to the attempt by the Trump administration and their very, very corrupt Department of Justice to dismiss without prejudice the criminal bribery charges against the corrupt New York City mayor, Eric Adams. Everybody will recall that Mayor Adams was charged with engaging in various forms of bribery with foreign governments like Turkey. There was a treasure trove of evidence. But Adams started sucking up to Donald Trump. He went to Mar-a-Lago. He did the walk of shame Mar-a-Lago thing that we saw so many do at the beginning of the Trump administration. They seem to have had some quid pro quo that they talked about on Fox News thereafter about how you had Tom Homan, the border czar, sitting next to Adams right there and basically saying, if you don't do what we told you to do, things are going to get a little, we could come back and we could bring those charges again. He made words to those effect. It was so concerning that all of these people at the Justice Department quit, including lots of right-wing lawyers as well, prosecutors at the SDNY, all the way to their top acting United States attorney there, a lot of their assistant United States attorneys, people in Washington, D.C., in the main Justice Department, they resigned. They finally got somebody to file this dismissal. But Michael Popok, tell us, what did Judge Ho ultimately do?
Yeah, Judge Ho, and any federal judge, has what we call inherent authority, and there's also federal rules that allow him not to accept the government, which is the prosecutor. We all, again, the tutorial on how our co-equal branches of government works. The executive branch is the prosecutor, FBI executive branch, prison system executive branch. Judiciary is the keeper of the flame of the rules and the law and the interpretation. And when the prosecutor wants to generally dismiss a case, it gets dismissed, and the judge has very little ability to do anything about it, except in certain circumstances, unique circumstances. And that's all we talk about with Donald Trump. It's always unique, aberrational circumstances, because that's his MO. We saw him test the limits and go beyond it. Of the firewalls and guardrails around him in the criminal justice system when he was a defendant in the criminal justice system. And of course, his presidency in the Department of Justice, led by the people that were his lawyers in the criminal justice system, is, of course, they're going to follow that playbook. And they ran into a Judge Ho. And let me just talk about Dale Ho for a minute. Then I'll get to his inherent authority. And then we'll talk about what he did and why I'm not entirely thrilled with what he did, but we'll talk about it. Dale Ho barely squeaked by a very staunch opposition by the Republicans to be confirmed. Great for the Democrats and moderates. He's just the person you'd want to pick. Constitutional scholar, voting rights expert, and lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union and the NAACP. Clerked in that particular courthouse. If you weren't playing politics, Dale Ho, 30 years ago, he would have gotten confirmed without really a problem with the president that picked him and Joe Biden. But here he squeaked by with one vote. But it doesn't matter how many votes you get. It's like the old joke about, what do you call the person that graduates last in his medical school class? Doctor. He's a federal judge for life. And I had a lot of hope. I was like, oh, this is a terrible pick for Donald Trump. Let's see what happens next. And what happened, as you outlined or started to outline, is that we got a 9-page letter from Danielle Sassoon, who the New Yorkers among us know, shining star among the Federalist Society, a 38-year-old Orthodox Jewish woman attorney in that office, was a rock star. In fact, I was surprised she wasn't picked to be the U.S. attorney by Donald Trump, but she issued a scathing 9-page resignation letter off of the quid pro quo of the exchange of the Trump administration telling out loud, Eric Adams, you, an elected official, you play ball on policy related to immigration status with us. And you know, that indictment that happened under the Biden administration will sort of make it go away, but we'll hang it over your head as a sword. And if you don't play ball with us, we'll drop the guillotine and chop your head off. I mean, that's basically the deal. You know, he sat on the lap of Tom Homan almost literally during Fox and Friends. The borders are chuckling it up. And I've met Mayor Adams. I was a moron and I donated to Mayor Adams' campaign after a fundraiser when he was running. I had high hopes for Mayor Adams, as most people did. But that is the unholy, corrupt deal at the center. We know it because an outgoing interim acting U.S. attorney for Manhattan said it out loud. And she also declared that not only do none of the career prosecutors support the dismissal of the indictment, but they actually asked Department of Justice Pam Bondi / Emile Bove, who's I call him the Grim Reaper for the Department of Justice until Todd Blanche gets into the chair as the number 2 in the Department of Justice. He'll drop down to number 3. She went to them in Main Justice in Washington, Danielle Sassoon, and said, we want to re-indict. We want a superseding indictment because we think he lied to the FBI and he tried to destroy evidence. That's pretty damning stuff. So they said, no, don't do that because we're going to be doing this deal with him. So nobody in the office wanted to sign it until Ed Sullivan, a senior member, said, I'll sign the motion to dismiss, or what we call null pros, the indictment. But he didn't show up in court. So all that Dale Ho had in court was Emile Bove and Alex Spiro, the lawyer for Eric Adams, who's also the lawyer for Elon Musk, just to show you the incestuousness here of the Trump administration knows no boundaries. And what we would hope is what happened is that Dale Ho looked around the courtroom and said, I got a problem. I got nobody in opposition here because of the nature of the deal that you've struck. And I need somebody to argue the other side and get to the bottom of the facts that are set forth in Danielle Sassoon's letter. And he also knows, if he didn't acknowledge it in his hearing, he knows that 5 or 6 other major prosecutors, the heads of the public integrity unit in Washington, resigned over this very thing, because of this potentially corrupt deal. I pushed for something else in my hot take. I thought, under my interpretation of a law Supreme Court ruling, that he actually has the inherent authority to go one step further. And he may still do this, which is to assign a special prosecutor to continue to prosecute the case, finding that the Department of Justice is ethically conflicted. But he's not there yet. So what he said is, I need a fact finder. I need somebody to evaluate the facts for me because Emile Bove is not going to do it. And I was like, okay, here we go. Great. You're going to use your powers to do the special counsel. Great. Who is it? And then he announced Paul Clement. And I said, this is back to what you said at the top of the podcast. Are you effing kidding me? Paul Clement, the rightest of right-wing former solicitor generals who was on the hump or wrong side of every major issue that matters to Democrats and fair-thinking people. The guy that was on the wrong side of same-sex marriage, the wrong side of gun control, the wrong side of the Second Amendment, the wrong side of Obamacare. That's the only guy who had to leave his major law firm because they told him you can't keep taking these Second Amendment cases while school shootings are going on. That's the guy. This is like when Merrick Garland appointed Robert Hur, a right-wing Republican, to go investigate Joe Biden because they all want to bend over backwards to act impartial. There are plenty of former Democratic solicitor generals, if that's the road you wanted to go down, Judge Ho, that you could have selected. And I would have been fine with it. I had a perfect one that I actually played up, I think right before he did it. Judge Ludig, who's been on our show, who is a Federalist Society, the founder of the Rule of Law Society, a former appellate court judge. He saved our democracy. Let him look into it, right? Not Paul Clement. So this is my fear, and I want to get it from you, Ben, is that Paul Clement this right wing, not MAGA, but real right wing conservative, is not going to make himself persona non gratis in the Republican Party. He is not going to make himself radioactive against getting other cases. Hello. He's not going to make himself radioactive against other cases and take a position that is an anathema or opposed to Donald Trump and Emile Beauvais. It's almost like the fix is in. I'd be shocked.
I'll say this.
Well, hold on, let me finish. I'd be shocked if Clement finds. Maybe he does. I'm just saying. Why does it have to be Paul Clement exactly?
I took a class by Paul Clement in Georgetown University Law Center. When I say I took a class, I dropped it after 3 classes because he was too right-wing for me. Okay. And that's when, if you've heard me tell the story before, how they tried to recruit me into the Federalist Society, and then I said, this is not for me. That's my Paul Clement story. It was a course being taught at Georgetown Law Center by Paul Clement and Viet Dinh. Viet Dinh had written the Patriot Act at that time, and Viet Dinh went on to become the general counsel of Fox during all of the election lies. And so he was all over that discovery.
And got fired.
with Rupert Murdoch. I probably got a nice payout, but I dropped that course and I said, I can't do that. And then I pursued a path in civil rights. Now, let me give you this perspective, though, which is Harry Littman, former top federal prosecutor, literally one of the top 3 positions in all of the DOJ when he was in Washington, D.C. He was also the top federal prosecutor in the Western District of Pennsylvania. He thought that the appointment of Paul Clement was a good thing in the hot take because he thought that, look, Paul Clement's, and this could just be, prosecutor to prosecutor crap, right. But he thought that Paul Clement was a serious guy. He thought Paul Clement would come out with a report that would likely be scathing of the decision to dismiss the case against Eric Adams. But ultimately, the issue and the problem is that who will prosecute the case against Eric Adams if the Department of Justice refuses to, because it is now a mafia organization and we have this constitutional crisis taking place. So I think the point was he doesn't expect Paul Clement to look favorably. What the outcome of all of this, is that this is a corrupt deal. And maybe, that one of the things I suggested is, maybe what the judge can try to do is force some sort of tolling agreement amongst the parties to extend the statute of limitations, later on. But ultimately, this is a very corrupt DOJ doing corrupt mafia style things. And I'll just give you an example. And I just want to pivot to this other instance as well, because we'll keep track of what's going on there. But you have Ed Martin, for example, the United States attorney in Washington, D.C. He's sending members of Congress letters right now saying that he's criminally investigating them. You had Congress member Garcia got a letter, a Democrat here from California, former Long Beach mayor, who's on the show a lot. I think he's a great Congress member. Chuck Schumer got a letter, Democratic senator from New York. And what they say they're criminally investigating them for is their speech. And they say you're encouraging violent protests against Donald Trump by telling people to take to the streets in a way that indicates violence, and you're being criminally investigated. So you have that taking place as well. And this is just who they are. I mean, the DOJ right now, it's not that it's not independent, it's that it's 100% lawless. And I want to put a lot of this blame, if not all of it, also on dicta, a line that was even said in the absolute immunity ruling by Chief Justice John Roberts, who now is woe is me, cry me a river, in his annual report about we have to protect against people not following judicial orders and overreach by executive branch and blah, 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 blah. He literally said one of the categories for absolute immunity is what the president says to their attorney general, which it's like, hey, Chief Justice John Roberts, do you have no indication of the law as well that the DOJ and the main executive, even though the DOJ is part of the executive branch, but the White House and the DOJ always had a history of being independent, and now you want to immunize if the president gives directives to the attorney general? That was never the way it's supposed to be. So, Popok, I just wanted to flag that.
Welcome back. First, let me thank everybody in our audience. I just looked at the recent numbers, And we are number 30, one of our highest rankings ever in all news globally on podcasts on the Apple Pod platform. And probably closer to top 10 when you add in all the other aspects of the way people consume Legal AF. And we're in the top 150 of all podcasts. There's billions of them, all podcasts around the world, regardless of the type of podcast. That's all because of you. We built it, sure. We program it. We curate it. But you, our audience, are active, engaged, enthusiastic. You've taken us to your heart. We've taken you to ours. And together, we'll hold this rogue criminal administration accountable. So until my next Legal AF contribution, follow us on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Join our community of Legal AF. We're people-powered. We're word-of-mouth powered. We're organically grown. We add one more today. I'm thrilled. And that's where you come in with a clip like that. If you saw our show already, we appreciate you being there. If you missed our show, there's a clip. Send it off to friends and family. Ask them to join Legal AF. So until my next reporting, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.